1 million. That's how many times Donald Trump's name appears in the unredacted Epstein files, according to a Democratic congressman who spent 2 hours searching through them at the Department of Justice. I had to read that 3 times. 1 million mentions of the sitting president of the United States in files related to a convicted child sex trafficker. And here's the part that should make everyone sit up. In the publicly released version of those same files, Trump's name only appears about 38,000 times. Which means, if these numbers are accurate, the Department of Justice redacted more than 96% of every mention of Donald Trump before releasing the files to the public. This is the story that's unfolding right now in real time, and I don't think people fully grasp what's happening. Over the past 3 weeks, the Justice Department has released more than 3.5 million pages of documents, 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images related to Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise. It's the largest document dump in American legal history, and what's emerging from those files is systematically contradicting everything the Trump administration has told the public about what's in them. Let me walk you through what's actually been discovered, because the mainstream coverage is missing the scale of this. Representative Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, went to the Justice Department on February 9th to review the unredacted files. Members of Congress were given access to 4 computers in a small room, with DOJ staff watching over their shoulders. They couldn't bring phones, they couldn't bring staff, they could only take notes on paper pads provided by the department. Raskin searched for Trump's name. It appears more than 1 million times, he told Axios, so it's all over the place. He later clarified that he searched for Trump and Donald or Don and got more than 1 million results. He acknowledged he couldn't verify every mention was the current president. But here's what he did verify. One of the first documents he came across directly contradicted what Trump has been saying for years. It was a 2009 email exchange between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. In it, Epstein recounted what his lawyers told him about a conversation with Trump's lawyers. According to Raskin, Trump is paraphrased and quoted as saying, "No, Jeffrey Epstein was not a member of Mar-a-Lago, but he was a guest at Mar-a-Lago, and no, we never asked him to leave." That email was from 2009, 2 years after Trump claims he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, and the Justice Department redacted it. And that was redacted for some indeterminate, inscrutable reason, Raskin said. I know it seems to be at odds with some things that President Trump has been saying recently about how he had kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club. What's your first reaction to this? I'm genuinely curious if I'm the only one who finds this alarming. Now let me tell you about what Representative Thomas Massie discovered, because this is where it gets explosive. Massie is a Republican. He's not part of the resistance. He's a libertarian-leaning Kentucky congressman who co-authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act with Democrat Ro Khanna. He's been one of the loudest voices demanding these files be released, and after he reviewed the unredacted documents, he publicly accused FBI Director Kash Patel of lying to Congress. Here's what happened. In September 2025, Patel testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee. He was asked whether the FBI had any evidence that Epstein trafficked young women to other people. There is no credible information, none, Patel said under oath. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday, that he trafficked to other individuals. At a House hearing the same week, Patel was asked if the files pointed to other people having engaged in underage sex. That's correct, he said. To my knowledge, no. Then Massie went to the Justice Department and found a 2019 FBI document that lists Les Wexner, the billionaire founder of Victoria's Secret, as a co-conspirator in child sex trafficking. The document names him explicitly, and Patel testified, under oath, that no such evidence existed. This is significant because Kash Patel testified to Congress that FBI had no evidence of other sex traffickers, Massie wrote on social media. This is FBI's own 2019 document listing Wexner as co-conspirator in child sex trafficking. It wasn't unredacted until tonight. The Justice Department had redacted Wexner's name from the public release. After Massie called them out, they unredacted it. A legal representative for Wexner said the assistant U.S. attorney told his counsel in 2019 that he was neither a co-conspirator nor target in any respect. But that doesn't explain why the FBI document calls him exactly that. This is where I want your perspective because this situation is getting more complicated by the hour. Massie and Khanna identified at least 6 men whose names were redacted from the public files, despite being, in their words, likely incriminated by their contents. After pressure from the congressman, the DOJ unredacted most of them. Kana read the names on the House floor: Salvatore Nuara, Zurab Mikaladze, Leonik Leonov, Nicola Caputo, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, CEO of Dubai Ports World, and Leslie Wexner. The Sultan was particularly notable because of an email Massey discovered. Epstein wrote to a redacted recipient, "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." Massey reverse-searched the email address and discovered it was bin Sulayem, who sent Epstein what Epstein described as a torture video. Until tonight, no one knew who sent the torture video to Epstein, Massey wrote. Our law requires victims' information to be redacted, not information of men who sent Epstein torture porn. The law Massey helped write specifically prohibits the DOJ from redacting the names of accomplices. The DOJ did it anyway. Now here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. On February 11th, Attorney General Pam Bondi testified before the House Judiciary Committee. It was a contentious hearing. Democrats pressed her about the redactions. Republicans demanded answers about the delays. Survivors sat in the hearing room watching. Then photographers captured something extraordinary. Bondi was holding a black binder. One page was visible. It was titled, Jayapal Pramila Search History. Representative Pramila Jayapal, a Democrat from Washington who sits on the Judiciary Committee, had gone to the DOJ the day before to review the unredacted files. The DOJ logged everything she searched for, and Bondi brought that list to the hearing. It is totally inappropriate and against the separations of powers for the DOJ to surveil us as we search the Epstein files, Jayapal wrote after seeing the photo. Bondi showed up today with a burn book that held a printed search history of exactly what emails I searched. That is outrageous, and I intend to pursue this and stop this spying on members. Jayapal confirmed the searches listed on Bondi's document matched exactly what she had looked up, in the exact order she searched. Is this the whole reason they opened up to us 2 days early? Jayapal asked. So they could essentially surveil members to see what we were going to ask her about? Even House Speaker Mike Johnson, Trump's most reliable ally in Congress, called it inappropriate. I think members should obviously have the right to peruse those at their own speed and with their own discretion, and I don't think it's appropriate for anybody to be tracking that, Johnson said. The DOJ's response? A spokesperson said the department logs all searches made on its systems to protect against the release of victim information. But that doesn't explain why Bondi had printouts of lawmakers' search histories at a congressional hearing. It doesn't explain why she appeared to have prepared talking points based on what specific members had searched for. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called Bondi petty and said the tracking was a disgrace that violates the principles of separate and co-equal branches of government. Let me give you the bigger picture now, because individual revelations are only part of the story. At least half a dozen top officials in the current Trump administration have connections to Jeffrey Epstein documented in these files. NBC News reviewed the documents and identified Navy Secretary John Phelan, who appears on 2 flight manifests from 2006, flying with Epstein from New York to London and back. Thomas Barrack, now serving as U.S. Ambassador to Turkey, who maintained regular contact with Epstein for years after his 2008 conviction. CBS News found over 100 texts and email exchanges between them. Kevin Warsh, Trump's nominee to be the next Federal Reserve Chairman, whose name appears on a 2010 email listing people invited to a St. Barth's Christmas gathering. Dr. Oz, now running the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, who sent Epstein what appeared to be an invitation to a Valentine's Day party in 2016, 3 years after Epstein's first conviction. Stephen Feinberg, the billionaire who's now the number 2 official at the Pentagon, who appears in connection with his firm, Cerberus Capital Management. And Steve Bannon, Trump's former senior advisor, who appears in video footage interviewing Epstein in 2019, asking him, "Do you think you're the devil himself?" The video was released in the files last month. In it, Bannon questions Epstein about morality issues. "No, but I do have a good mirror," Epstein responds when asked if he thinks he's the devil. During the Bondi hearing, Democratic Representative Becca Balint pressed the Attorney General on whether any current administration officials have been questioned by the Justice Department about their ties to Epstein. "I don't know whether he has addressed those or not," Bondi said of Phelan. Trump himself has claimed the files conclusively prove he's been 100% exonerated. But the files show something very different. The former Palm Beach chief of police testified to the FBI in 2019 that after Epstein's arrest in the early 2000s, Trump claimed he threw Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. Trump also reportedly told the police chief that everyone has known he's been doing this, and that Maxwell is evil and to focus on her. If Trump knew everyone was aware Epstein was abusing children, why did his relationship with Epstein continue for years afterward? The files contain photos of Trump and Epstein together at social events throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s. The files also include internal FBI summaries, interview notes, and litigation exhibits that list Trump alongside other prominent men as subjects of salacious allegations compiled during the investigations. At least one woman's allegation, contained in an unverified FBI tip, involves claims about Trump and a 13-year-old victim. The allegation is unverified, but it exists in government records. Here's what I think is getting missed in the coverage. The MAGA movement is starting to turn on its own people over this. Conservative podcast host Tim Dillon dedicated a portion of his latest show to torching Kash Patel, calling him a big fat liar and demanding his resignation. Everyone in the world now knows that there was 100% a human trafficking operation where Jeffrey Epstein was procuring girls for wealthy and powerful people. Everybody knows that, Dillon said. Joe Rogan praised the rant, calling Dillon the greatest ranter that has ever lived. Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming, who had previously dismissed the Epstein files as not her issue, said after reviewing the unredacted documents, "Now I see what the big deal is. And the members of Congress that have been pushing this were not wrong." Democratic Representative Jared Moskowitz, after his own review, described the content as just gross, and said a list of Epstein's co-conspirators would surprise the public, because a lot of them were women. This is bipartisan horror at what's in these files, and bipartisan frustration at how they've been handled. The survivors, meanwhile, are furious. Attorneys representing more than 200 alleged victims asked federal judges to order the immediate takedown of the Justice Department's Epstein Files website, calling the release the single most egregious violation of victim privacy in one day in United States history. The DOJ released nude images of young women with their faces visible. It published home addresses, bank information, the names of victims who had never publicly come forward. In some cases, names appeared more than 100 times without redaction. There is no conceivable degree of institutional incompetence sufficient to explain the scale, consistency, and persistence of the failures that occurred, the attorneys wrote. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche defended the department, saying redaction errors affected about 0.001% of all materials. But the attorneys documented thousands of redaction failures on behalf of nearly 100 individual survivors in just the first few days. So what does this all add up to? The Trump administration promised to release the Epstein files. When they finally did, after Congress forced their hand, they redacted the names of potential co-conspirators while exposing the identities of victims. They appear to have removed more than 96% of references to the current president. They're tracking what members of Congress search for, and the FBI director's testimony has been directly contradicted by the FBI's own documents. Congress still hasn't seen all the files. The DOJ claims it released everything required by law, but lawmakers dispute this. There are an estimated 6 million pages in total. Only about half have been made public. Ghislaine Maxwell, currently serving 20 years for sex trafficking, was brought before Congress on February 9th. She invoked the Fifth Amendment and refused to answer any questions. Her lawyer said she would talk if Trump granted her clemency. That offer is still on the table. And the midterm elections are 9 months away. Democrats are planning to make the Epstein files a central issue. Republicans are calculating whether the files hurt them more than they hurt Democrats. Everyone is watching to see what else emerges. Here's my question, and I want your honest answer. If more than 1 million mentions of the president were redacted from files related to a child sex trafficking operation, and those redactions are now being reversed piece by piece, where does this end? Because we're only 3 weeks into the release. Journalists, lawmakers, and survivors are still combing through 3.5 million pages. Every day brings new revelations. Every day brings new contradictions of what the administration has claimed. And every time a reporter asks Trump about it, he attacks her for not smiling. What are we supposed to make of that? Let me know in the comments.